Have you ever heard something in the woods that you just know isn't an animal? Something that sounds wrong even though you can't quite say why. I used to think that was just paranoia. Some instinct left over from when we had to watch out for predators in the dark. But after what happened to me in Wisconsin, I know better. Some things out there aren't just animals. Some things watch, some things wait. I work as a lumberjack, have for years. Miami's home, but I take jobs all over. One winter, me and a couple of the guys, Reed, Thomas, and Big Joe, took a camping trip out in the Wisconsin North Woods before starting a new contract. Just a way to unwind. It was dead winter, but the weather was calm. No wind, no snow, just crisp air and a thick, endless forest. We set up camp near an old logging road, far from any towns. There was a full moon that night, lighting up the snow-covered ground in an eerie, silvery glow. We had a fire going, some beers cracked open, and we were talking about dumb stuff. I remember bringing up an article I'd read in some outdoor magazine, one of those cryptid sighting things. It talked about the Ruga, a creature from Native American legends, something like a werewolf, but worse. Said it was a cursed being, something that used to be human, but wasn't anymore. I laughed about it, calling it nonsense. Reed though, he didn't laugh. It's not just a story, man, he said, staring into the fire. My granddad used to talk about that thing. Said it doesn't just hunt you like an animal, it plays with people. Waits till you're good and scared before it moves in. This should have been the first sign to pack up. We turned in not long after, sleeping in separate tents. I was out cold, but at some point something woke me up. A noise, soft but unnatural. Not the usual creaks of trees or rustle of animals. It was like wet breathing, a slow inhale right outside my tent. I didn't move, I just listened. Something shifted outside, footsteps, but not normal ones. Heavy, deliberate. It circled the tent once, then stopped. I swear, I could feel it standing there, just beyond the fabric. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. I sat there for maybe an hour, gripping my knife, hard hammering. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe a deer, a coyote. But in the morning, I found tracks outside my tent. Not hooves, not paws, feet. They were long, human-like, but wrong, clawed. I showed the others. Joe cursed. Thomas tried to laugh it off. Some local messing with us, he said. But Reed just stared at the prints, face pale. We shouldn't be here, he muttered. We should have listened. That night, it got worse. We stayed up later than before, keeping the fire big. No one wanted to say it, but we all felt something. The woods weren't quiet anymore. There was movement out there, just out of sight. A branch snapping, a quick shuffle of steps, then silence. It was watching us. At one point, Joe got fed up. He grabbed his axe and marched toward the trees, yelling, "You wanna play games, huh? Come out then." The response was immediate. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from the darkness. It wasn't a bear, wasn't a wolf. It was too deep, too unnatural. It sounded hungry. We saw it then, just a shape, standing at the edge of the firelight. Too tall for a man, too thin. Its eyes, God, its eyes were burning like embers in the dark. It took a step forward, and I swear, I saw a long, stretched out face. Something between a wolf and a man. Its mouth was wrong, too wide, teeth too sharp. And then, it smiled. We grabbed our weapons, knives, axes, even a damn flare gun. But the thing didn't charge. It circled us. just beyond the light, moving in that unnatural, jerky way, like a puppet on broken strings. It was toying with us. We backed toward the car, but we had to go through the trees to get there. No one wanted to be the first to move. Then Reed, poor Reed, made the mistake of running. The second he bolted, the thing screeched. Not a howl, not a roar, something shrill and nightmarish. It lunged. I saw Reed go down in the snow. We rushed in, swinging, yelling. Joe hit it with the axe, but it barely flinched. It laughed, I swear to God. It laughed. But it let Reed go. It wanted to play. We didn't wait around. We dragged Reed up and ran. It followed, keeping pace, darting between the trees, enjoying itself. Somehow, we made it to the main road. We must have looked insane, 4 grown men covered in snow and sweat, weapons in hand. When the truck came, we didn't hesitate. We waved it down, piled up, and screamed at the driver to go. I looked back once. The thing stood at the tree line, just watching us. It didn't chase, it didn't attack, it just grinned. We never went back for the tents, never spoke about it much after either. Reed moved down south, Joe quit logging, Thomas won't go near the woods anymore. As for me, I still work in the forest, but I never go alone, and I never ignore that feeling of being watched, because sometimes something is really out there. Hi everyone, Nick here from Better Tell It. It's Ruga night today. I hope you enjoyed the stories, thank you for tuning in, and now let's go to the next story. You ever hear something you weren't supposed to? Something that made you stop what you were doing and just listen? Like your body knew before your brain did that something was wrong. I hadn't until that trip. It was supposed to be a simple camping weekend, me and a couple of buddies out in Montana, just getting away from everything for a while. Work had been running me ragged at the shop, and I figured a few nights in the wild would do me some good. I brought my dog, Boomer, big old mutt, part shepherd, part who knows what, smart as hell though, and a good boy. We set up camp in a spot near the tree line, not too far from a creek. Weather was calm, cool enough that we needed jackets at night, but nothing crazy. The first day went fine, hiking, fishing, cracking beers by the fire. It wasn't until the second night that the things got strange. Boomer was the first to notice. We were sitting around the fire, swapping stories, when his ears perked up. He didn't bark, just stared off into the trees, muscles tense. At first I figured it was a deer or maybe a coyote, but the way he was acting, low growling, body stiff, it made me uneasy. Then we heard it. A branch snapped, not like a little twig either. Something heavy had stepped on it. We all went quiet, listening. Another crunch, then another, slow, deliberate. It wasn't running, it wasn't scared, it was watching. Probably a bear, Mike muttered, reaching for the flashlight. I wasn't so sure. Boomer's hackles were up, his teeth bared. He'd seen bears before and never reacted like this. I shined my own light toward the trees, but there was nothing, just dark shapes shifting in the firelight. Then we heard breathing. It was faint but deep, something big inhaling slow and steady, and it was close. Maybe we should. Jeff started, but before he could finish, the thing moved, fast. Branches shook, the sound of something huge shifting through the undergrowth sent a wave of pure primal terror through me. We all scrambled for our guns, nothing heavy, just a few pistols and a shotgun, enough to scare something off if needed. I thought for sure it was going to come charging out of the woods, but it didn't. It just stopped. Silence. Whatever it was, it wanted us to know it was there. And then it left, moving back into the deeper woods, slow and deliberate. I didn't sleep that night. Morning came, and I was damn near ready to call it quits. But the guys talked me into staying one more night, said we were probably overreacting, that maybe it was just an animal passing through. Boomer though, he hadn't touched his food, he just kept staring at the tree line, ears twitching at every sound. I should have trusted him. That night, the air felt wrong. It was too quiet. The usual sounds, crickets, owls, even the wind, were gone. We sat by the fire, barely talking. Every now and then, we'd hear movement out in the woods. Not coming closer, not moving away, just circling. It was messing with us. At some point, I swore I saw something in the dark. Tall, too tall to be a grown person, but standing on two legs. Eyes low to the ground, but glowing faintly, like an animal's. And the way it moved, slow, deliberate, almost like it was pacing. Then came the smell. Rot, like meat left in the sun too long. It hit all at once, thick and suffocating. Boomer lost it. He started barking like mad, lunging toward the trees. That's when the thing let out a sound I'll never forget. A growl, deep and guttural, rising into something almost human, but wrong. Like a voice being stretched and twisted into something unnatural. And then it came. I barely saw it move, just a blur of something pale and fast rushing between the trees. The fire flickered as it passed, wind whipping through the clearing. Jeff fired first, the shotgun blast echoing through the night. Nothing. Then Mike screamed. The thing had circled behind us. I turned just in time to see something lunging at him from the dark. A flash of long clawed fingers reaching from the trees. It caught his arm, tore through his jacket like paper. I fired blindly, and it vanished back into the woods. Run! I grabbed Mike and shoved him toward the trail. We didn't argue, we didn't grab our gear. We just ran. The thing followed. I could hear it moving, always just behind us, never fully showing itself. Every now and then it would let out that awful sound, half growl, half laugh, like it was enjoying this. Boomer was leading the charge, his barks cutting through the night. My lungs burned, legs screaming, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Then I saw lights. A road. We broke through the tree line so fast I nearly fell face first into the dirt. A pair of headlights rounded the bend, and I did the only thing I could think of. I ran into the road, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car skidded to a stop. An old guy, probably a rancher, rolled down his window, eyes wide. "You boys alright?" I looked back toward the trees. Nothing, just dark, swaying branches, no movement, no glowing eyes. But we knew. That thing was still there, watching, waiting. Mike needed stitches. Whatever got him, it left deep, ragged gashes, too wide to be from an animal. He told the doctor it was a bear. None of us argued. We never went back for our gear. Hell, I haven't been camping since. Later, I did some research. Found old stories, native legends, hunters' tales, whispers about something in the Montana woods that wasn't human. They called it a Ruga, a thing that could think, could stalk, could hurt. I don't know what we saw out there, but I know this. It wasn't just an animal, and it wanted us to know. Alright, listen up, because I swear on everything I've ever known, this actually happened. If you think I'm making this up, fine, tell yourself that. But if you ever find yourself out in the Arizona wilderness, with the rain pounding down and the wind howling through the canyons, remember my story, because something is out there. My name is Chris Johnson, and I work as a zookeeper in Chicago. I love fixing up old cars, but when you're surrounded by steel and concrete every day, you start craving something a little more wild. So when my buddy Dylan suggested a camping trip out in the Arizona backcountry, I was all in. It was me, Dylan, and our friends Mark and Jesse, a couple of city guys looking for a little adventure in the middle of nowhere. We didn't plan for rain, but by the time we reached the site, the sky was already turning black. It wasn't just a drizzle, it was a downpour. Thick sheets of rain turning the ground to mud, the wind whistling through the trees like something whispering just beyond your ear. But we were tough guys, right? No way we were turning back. The first night was when things got wrong. I was the last one awake, poking at the fire while the rain hissed against the embers. The wind had died down a little, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. Not like a bear or a coyote, this was different. Then I heard it. A branch snapped, loud, too deliberate to be the wind. My stomach knotted up. I turned slowly, staring into the blackness beyond the trees. And then something moved. Not just a shadow shifting, but something tall, pale, and fast. It was there and then gone, slipping between the trees like a ghost. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it at the trees, my heart slamming in my chest. "Dylan?" I called over my shoulder. No answer. "Mark, Jesse?" Still nothing, just the sound of rain and my own breathing. Then came the noise, a deep guttural, clicking sound, like bones knocking together. It came from everywhere, behind me, to the left, to the right. I spun in circles, my flashlight beam cutting through the rain. Then silence. I stood there, frozen, waiting for something, anything, to move. But after what felt like forever, I convinced myself I was just spooked. Just the wind, maybe an animal. I was wrong. The next morning, Dylan and Mark had their rifles slung over their shoulders, checking the perimeter. We told ourselves it was just paranoia, but none of us really believed that. Jesse, though he looked rattled, he finally told us what had him so freaked out. "I saw something last night," he muttered, barely meeting our eyes. "Something tall, pale. It was standing right outside the tent." Dylan scoffed, but Mark and I exchanged a look. "You saw it too?" I asked. Jesse nodded. "It was just staring. Then it ran off." That was when I remembered something. I had read about creatures in Arizona before, things that moved like men but weren't men. A long time ago, I'd come across this magazine article about the Ruga, a legend, some kind of cursed creature, starving, relentless, never stopping once it's locked onto prey. I didn't say anything, not yet. We decided to pack up early, hike back to the car while we still had daylight, but we weren't fast enough. It started in the late afternoon. We were moving through the trees, backs strapped tight, weapons out. The rain hadn't let up, and the mud was slowing us down. And then we saw it. A pale figure just ahead, standing between the trees. It was tall, too tall to be human, its limbs unnaturally long. Its skin was stretched thin over its bones, and its eyes, God, its eyes were black pits, hollow and endless. It tilted its head, studying us, and then it grinned. Mark cursed and raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the thing moved. It was fast, impossibly fast, slipping between the trees like smoke. That's when we heard the second one, then the third. They are circling us. I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking. Jesse was whispering something, maybe a prayer, maybe just losing his mind. Mark was the first to shoot. The gunshot cracked through the forest, but the thing didn't fall. It screamed, a sound that ripped through the rain like a sharp, something between a human wail and an animal's dying cry. And then It charged. Jesse didn't have time to react. The thing was on him, claws ripping, teeth sinking into his shoulder. He screamed, blood mixing with the rain. Dylan and I grabbed him, yanking him away, but Mark just stood there, frozen. His hands were still on his rifle, but he couldn't move, couldn't blink. The thing turned on him, grinning that awful, inhuman grin. Dylan grabbed my arm. "Run!" We didn't have a choice. Jesse was bleeding bad, but we didn't stop. The things were chasing us, moving faster than anything should. I could hear them behind us, that awful clicking sound getting closer. The trees thinned, the road was ahead. I don't know how we did it, but we reached the car, yanking the doors open, shoving Jesse inside. Dylan floored the gas before the doors were even shut. As we tore down the road, I made the mistake of looking back. They were standing there, watching, still grinning. Jesse survived, barely. He had claw marks deep in his shoulder, too clean, too sharp for any animal I've ever seen. We don't talk about what happened, not really. We tell people Jesse got attacked by a coyote. We tell ourselves it was just some freak accident, some weird trick of the light. But sometimes, late at night, I hear that sound again, that awful bone-knocking, clicking, and I know it's still out there, waiting. You can believe this story or not, I don't care. I know what I saw, and I know what happened. My name's George Cage. I spent most of my life working as a lumberjack down in Miami, but I've always had a thing for old cars, fixing them up, getting them running again. I like things that make sense, things that can be explained, but what I saw out in the Appalachians, that's something I'll never be able to understand. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a few days camping, hiking, just getting away from the noise of everyday life. The group was small, just me, my buddy Travis, and the guy he worked with named Hector. We weren't city boys, but we also weren't exactly wilderness experts. Still, we had our gear, a couple of hunting rifles, and enough supplies to last the weekend. What we didn't plan for was the rain. It started that first evening. The rain had been coming down since we set up camp, turning the ground to thick mud, making everything damp and miserable. We huddled around a fire under a tarp, passing a flask back and forth, talking about nothing important. It should have been peaceful, but something about the forest felt wrong. I noticed it first, the feeling of being watched. At first I brushed it off, probably just nerves. But then, when I stepped away from the fire to take a leak, I saw it. Beyond the trees, just past the edge of our camp, something was sitting behind the tree. It wasn't hiding exactly, more like waiting. I couldn't make out much in the rain, just the shape of it. Tall, thin, hunched over, like its bones didn't fit right under its skin. But what got me were its eyes. They weren't animal eyes, they weren't even human. They were deep black pits, almost reflective in the firelight, staring right at me. I felt these deep primal instincts, the kind of fear you don't question, the kind that tells you, run. I backed up slowly, not taking my eyes off it. And then, without sound, it just stood up. I couldn't breathe. It was too tall, its limbs too long. The thing's head tilted, like it was curious. I called out, "Hey, who's there?" But it didn't move. I should have run. I should have yelled for the others. Instead, I blinked. And when I opened my eyes again, it was gone. Just like that, I stood there in the rain, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I already knew better. I didn't sleep that night. The others were snoring away in their tents, but I lay there, listening, waiting. And then, around 3 in the morning, I heard something. Click, click, click. It sounded like bones tapping together, slow, deliberate, like it wanted me to know it was still there. I sat up, gripping the hunting knife I kept by my sleeping bag. The rain was still falling, masking every little noise, but when I looked toward the fire pit, I saw them again, those eyes, watching. This time I didn't look away. I woke the others. Travis cursed, grabbing his rifle. Hector shined his flashlight into the trees, but by then, the thing was already gone. "We're leaving at first light," I told them. No one argued. We moved fast the next morning, breaking camp in record time. The rain made everything harder, slippery rocks, thick mud, limited visibility. But we weren't taking chances. We were maybe a mile from the car when Hector stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Travis and I listened. Nothing but the rain. Then Hector screamed. We turned just in time to see something dart out of the trees, claws flashing. It tore into Hector's arm, yanking him off his feet like a rag doll. Travis fired his rifle, the shot echoing through the trees. The thing let go of Hector, disappearing into the undergrowth. But Hector was down, blood pouring from deep gashes in his arm. "We need to move, now," I said, hoisting him up. The rain was picking up again, turning the trail into a swamp. We couldn't afford to be slow, because that thing, it wasn't running away, it was hunting us. The sun was setting by the time we saw the road. We were soaked, covered in mud, exhausted. Hector could barely walk, and Travis and I were practically carrying him. But we weren't safe yet, because that clicking sound, it was all around us. I turned, rifle raised. The trees were full of shadows, shifting in the rain. And then, for just a second, I saw it again. Perched on a low branch, those black eyes locked onto mine. It grinned. Then it leapt. I don't remember firing. I don't remember if Travis did either. But the next thing I knew, we were running, dragging Hector toward the car. Not stopping, not thinking, just running. We barely made it. The second the doors were shut, Travis peeled out, mud spraying up behind us. I looked out the window, half expecting to see the thing chasing us. But the road was empty, like it had never been there at all. Hector survived. Needed stitches, but he made it. We don't talk about it much. We told people he got attacked by a mountain lion, but we all know that's a lie. I tried to research what we saw. I already had an idea, something I read once in an old yellow newspaper, back when I was younger. A creature that never stops hunting. A creature cursed by hunger. A Ruga. I don't know if that's what we saw. I don't want to know. All I know is that I'm never going back into those woods, and if you ever find yourself in the Appalachians, in the rain, and you hear a clicking sound behind you, don't turn around, just run. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I hope you like the stories. Please drop me a comment, give me a thumbs up if you like them. Also, please check out the description. I have linked my other channel called Better Play It, where I play some scary games. Now we are currently at Kona. If you know it, that's a cool game. Again, thank you for being here, thank you for supporting the channel. Wish you all the best. And now, good night.